Close your eyes. Imagine a line of knights on horseback marching out of a castle across a drawbridge to fight an enemy. It's a bright sunny day, and their armor glints in the sunshine, creating a dazzling sight. Knights were highly trained soldiers who served a particular noble or lord, as well as the king. They defended land, castles, and people. Knights rode on horses and were usually in positions of leadership on the battlefield. In military terms, a group of knights could change the outcome of a battle. Many brave and successful knights gained land and power. Over time, stories about knights, good and bad, became the subject of many songs of the Middle Ages. How did a boy become a knight? What was a knight's training like? What did knights do when they weren't fighting battles? Read on to find out. Most knights were the son of noblemen. They began training to become knights when they were even younger than you are now. When a lord's son was 7 or 8 years old, he was sent away from his home in a castle or manor to live with a relative or overlord, the person who had granted his father a fief. Why was he sent away? In his new home, he would learn to become a knight. The training took many years. In the first stage of training, the young boy served as a page boy. A page boy had to wait on tables and learn the proper manners of a nobleman. Horse riding skills were also very important. Pages practiced their riding skills all the time. Pages also had to become skilled with a sword as well as other weapons. At first, they learned to fight with fake swords. When a page was about 12, he would become a squire. A squire was a personal servant to a particular knight. He went everywhere with the knight. He cleaned the knight's armor and weapons and cared for his horse. One of his most important jobs was to help the knight get into his heavy armor. Depending on his rank, the squire might be knighted any time between the ages of 16 and 20. Sometimes a young man who was a member of the highest level of the nobility was knighted at an earlier age. Normally, a young man was knighted in a solemn ceremony. He stayed up all night praying that he would be a worthy knight. Then he would be presented with spurs, a sword, a shield, and a helmet. His sponsor, usually the lord who had taken him in as a page, would tap him lightly on the shoulder with a sword and dub him Sir Something or Other. Not all knights were born into noble families. The rank of a knight was one of the few positions of nobility that a commoner could hope to attain. Since nobles were usually desperate for brave fighting men, a soldier who showed bravery in battle would occasionally be knighted as a reward. An armored knight on horseback was a great fighting machine. Arrows from enemy archers could bounce off the steel plates. The armor also protected him from an enemy's sword and lance. In the early Middle Ages, armor was made of sheets of chainmail, metal rings, reinforced with plates of steel in key areas. A shirt of chainmail weighed about 25 pounds. Under the mail, the knight wore a shell of thick, hard leather. By 1400, chainmail was replaced by hinged and fitted steel plates that covered a knight from head to foot. A suit of armor could weigh as much as 65 pounds. It was not easy to move around in these metal suits. That's why knights needed squires to help prepare them for battle. However, once on horseback, a knight was a dangerous soldier. Knights had to stay in shape to face the challenges of battle. During peacetime, knights held tournaments. A tournament was a festive time for everyone on the lord's manor estate. Colorful banners would blow in the breeze on the tournament grounds. Knights painted colorful designs on shields and banners to identify themselves and their families. A tournament would often attract knights and guests from surrounding castles. Lords and ladies wore their finest robes as they watched their favorite knights charge toward each other on horseback. The goal of the competition was to use a lance to knock the opposing knight off his horse. This was called jousting. Nobles and serfs alike would bet money on their favorite knight to win the competition. From time to time, knights became a problem for their lords. After all, they were armed men who were trained to settle arguments violently with their swords. Even though they were the lord's vassals, and their job was to protect the lord from enemies, there were times when the lords felt threatened by their own knights. To control the knights and their potentially dangerous behavior, lords created a set of rules that knights should follow. These rules were called the Code of Chivalry. Knights were supposed to be generous, courteous, loyal, and honorable. The Code of Chivalry required knights to follow certain rules of fighting. For instance, if a knight surrendered, he couldn't try to escape. He had to fight fairly. He could not cheat. Chivalry also required knights to be kind and thoughtful to women. A part of the code called for knights to show loyalty to the lady they served. Sometimes a knight who fought in a tournament would tie his lady's scarf to his helmet to show that he was fighting on her behalf. People loved to hear romantic stories about the adventures of knights and their ladies. Troubadours or minstrels wrote long songs about knights and ladies. Minstrels traveled about singing and performing these songs for those who would pay to listen. Medieval knights, as we think of them, slowly disappeared, but mounted soldiers did not. Mounted soldiers were still needed in battle. They could lead a charge or launch a surprise attack. Their horse riding skills and ability to use a range of weapons meant that they were essential on the battlefield. In the end, mounted soldiers, although no longer noble knights bound to a code of chivalry, remained a key part of warfare for hundreds of years more.